They are the heroes you'll never know. Men who risk their lives to keep Australians safe. We can't show their faces, we can't say their names, as their heroic deeds have put their own families in danger.
I was enjoying the work, but the other thing, that I have put my family life and my life at risk because of the job that I was supporting the ADF.
They are among the estimated 4,000 Afghans who worked with Australian soldiers and officials in Afghanistan between 2001 and 2021, translating, providing intelligence, guarding Australian officers, helping with Australian projects.
Look, absolutely critical in a country in which our language, English, isn't the first language, but particularly in a counterinsurgency environment where you need to be engaging with the population.
Hired Afghans were routinely keeping our troops away from trouble. They warned Australian officials of potential danger hours before the deadly attack outside the Kabul airport. The Taliban was targeting Afghans supporting Westerners throughout the 19-year conflict. These men, now living in Australia, have lasting reminders of the Taliban's barbarism. Saeed, not his real name, was shot by a Taliban fighter who executed his two friends in front of him. It was one of many threats to his life.
Like going to work and or feeling someone is following me, like threat letters from the Taliban insurgents or phone calls from the Taliban insurgents calling me and threatening me that they will kill me or they will kill a member of my family.
Every day we are getting targeting by the enemy or the Taliban.
Now that Taliban is in control of the country, there are fears the Afghans still in Afghanistan who worked for Australia, as well as their relatives, are in dire danger.
And they are being hunted. The Taliban have had a lot of time to do it now. They can take their time in hunting our people because they know that they're not getting out in a timely fashion.
Glenn Colometes served 2 duties in Afghanistan. His translator took his own life. It's understood he was struggling to handle the stress of being tracked by the Taliban.
In the last week, we had one of our embassy guards abducted and presumed killed. We've had, in the last 12 months, we've had 2 of our interpreters killed. We've had numerous interpreters and their families beaten.
Hello, Mohammed. This is Brent from Sky News.
Sky News spoke with one of the many people pursued by the Taliban and in need of Australian help.
And we could not even go outside, and we could not send our children to school to learn something. The situation is here. It's very bad. We are left behind. Don't know what to do.
Mohammed, not his real name, told us the Taliban sent him death threats over the phone and by post. He says he and his family have been forced to move houses every week.
If they catch us, they will, do something with our family. We are scaring from our kids. We are scaring from our whole family.
The federal government has issued around 1,400 visas to Afghans who worked with Australians. Sky News understands around 1,000 locally engaged employees and family members remain in Afghanistan. Under the federal government's humanitarian program, 31,000 Afghan nationals will be resettled in Australia over the next 4 years. In a statement to Sky News, a Department of Home Affairs spokesperson says the Australian government remains committed to supporting the Afghan community at this distressing time, and the department is continuing to deliver visa grants under the Afghan LEE program.
Since the election, we've had 0 visas issued to our locally engaged employees or their families. And look, it's I don't know why the change. We're hearing nothing from immigration, defence or DFAT. We just need those visas. It's our people, under the legislative instrument and under government policy, both the former government and the current government, are triaged ahead of all other applications.
The Taliban takeover of Afghanistan was as sudden as it was shocking. The march was swift. The little opposition they faced was easily overwhelmed. The Taliban held around a third of Afghanistan provinces by the start of August 2021. By August 13, they'd claimed almost all of them. Kandahar, once the headquarters for Australian operations, was among the provincial capitals to fall.
The rapid advance has sparked warnings that the capital, Kabul, could fall within 90 days.
It would take far less than that. 2 days later, the capital was captured.
We're just going to bring you these live and exclusive pictures.
The Taliban's storming of the presidential palace was broadcast live.
It's almost like a family photo shots of the Taliban fighters.
President Ashraf Ghani fled. The US embassy was abandoned in scenes reminiscent of the fall of Saigon. The Taliban replaced the flag and declared the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. It prompted mass evacuations. Kabul airport became the epicenter of the chaos. Barriers were rushed, babies passed over razor wire, throngs of men chased and even clung to departing planes. More US and UK troops arrived to help the evacuations. Many thousands begged for a seat. This was not how US President Joe Biden planned America's longest war to end. He had promised a withdrawal and that the Afghan government would survive.
But the idea that somehow there's a way to have gotten out without chaos ensuing, I don't know how that happens.
That clearly wasn't the case. Though the White House perhaps should have known better, the Washington Post's Afghanistan Papers investigation revealed successive US administrations lied to the public about the situation in Afghanistan and underplayed the threat of the Taliban and ineptitude of Afghanistan forces. Those lucky enough to escape say no one who helped save Australian lives should be abandoned.
Say proudly I wore the uniform of the Australian Army, and I helped the Australian Army, and my brothers also helped the Australian Defence Forces in Afghanistan by the time the Australian government needed our help. And now we need the Australian Defence Forces or the Australian government to help my brothers, my family, to get them out of Afghanistan.
41 Australians were killed in the war to remove the Taliban from power and in the ultimately vain attempt to protect Afghanistan's democratic government, along with more than 6,000 US troops and contractors and 47,000 Afghan civilians. The war, according to some, continues.
In the hills of northern Afghanistan, a hail of gunfire hails a successful mission for the Afghan Resistance. This is now the biggest threat to the Taliban's control, the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan.
There is nothing else that they can do at the moment to suppress us. And as every day passes, we're becoming stronger.
The group formed as the Afghan government fell. Made up mostly of former members of the Afghan army, it claims to have hundreds of fighters and is operating in 12 provinces. One of its most senior figures told Sky News it's destined to rout the Taliban regime.
So what makes you think you can overthrow the Taliban now when the army couldn't prevent them from taking power?
Our men have more experience now. Their morale and motivation is much higher than a year ago, and they're motivated to liberate the country.
But that's a gradual process. The NRFA says it's in the first phase of its operation, a sort of guerrilla war to exhaust the enemy. Once they've grown in number and gathered sufficient resources, they'll start attempting to liberate provinces. And they want help.
The international community has to come together and to reach a consensus that the only strategy to defeat international terrorism is to strengthen the National Resistance Front, which is the last remaining forces that are fighting extremism and terrorism inside the country.
The group is led by the son of the revered guerrilla commander Ahmed Massoud. Known as the Lion, he was assassinated in an attack ordered by Osama bin Laden. The Lion Cubs forces claim to have enjoyed roaring recent success, shooting down a Taliban helicopter, killing 60 Taliban troops and detaining 40 others.
The Taliban haven't had any success in the battlefield. They have faced heavy casualties in the past 3 months. They haven't been able to take even one of our bases. In Panjshir, we have more than 20 bases. They haven't been successful to take even one base.
Afghanistan's been at war since the 1970s. The resistance guarantees the bloodshed continues.
I don't see any peace in Afghanistan prevailing after August 15. This is a new phase of the conflict, of the war that started 50 years ago. The only way lasting peace can be established in Afghanistan is through a legitimate political process, through democracy. Political legitimacy can only be derived from ballots, not bullets. There has to be elections.
The National Resistance Front may force the Taliban to enact democratic reforms. It may, at a stretch, one day force the Taliban from power. But it is certain to ensure the war rages on. Addressing the nation via technology it used to condemn, Taliban leaders celebrated the anniversary of what they see as their noble liberation.
The US and its allies occupied Afghanistan. Our children were killed by the US troops in school. Our farms were destroyed by the US. The guns and weapons in the hands of the Americans are all used against Afghans in this country.
And on the streets, chants of death to the infidels in parades past the former US embassy.
Today, we see the result of the struggle. It's like a dream come true.
While Taliban supporters talk of dreams fulfilled, millions of Afghans endure a nightmare. Kabul's Indira Gandhi Children's Hospital is emblematic of the country's humanitarian crisis. All 40 beds are full. They always are. Families here all share a similar story. They were too poor to feed their children properly.
I have financial problems. We are very poor. I didn't have enough to eat during pregnancy. I couldn't buy the needed medicines. That is why my child is now malnourished.
It's estimated around 80% of the country's 40 million citizens are living in poverty. Aid group Save the Children believes more than 4 million children are malnourished, including half of all children under 5.
As we go towards winter, the things are going to be worse. There are communities that are going to become completely cut off. There is a risk that some communities will slide into famine conditions if we do not provide assistance.
It is the impact of decades of war and instability. During the Taliban's first stint in power, Afghanistan had one of the lowest life expectancy rates in the world. The country received major international investment in the early 2000s after the Taliban was ousted, but overseas aid has been tapering off since 2012 and dropped significantly since the Taliban took over.
The civilians, women and children in Afghanistan cannot be allowed to die just because there is the larger political issues, and humanitarian organizations are here to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Sanctions are also strangling the Afghan economy. The United States is blocking the new government from accessing $7 billion of its central bank funds held overseas.
No justification for anyone to freeze the asset belongs to the Afghanistan people, and they should do it as early as possible.
Continuing the economic punishment and delaying desperately needed aid may lead to a catastrophe. At the very least, these hospitals will remain full, and more mothers will watch their little ones fade.